Jim Joyce, Wednesday,
Wednesday
Wednesday.
from the garage. You from the garage. I'm calling you from.
Yeah, I was gonna say because that looks like a different background from last week. So you can tell when Jim Joyce is vaccinated and moving around.
Definitely vaccinated. Definitely moving around. I'm just outside of Boston in a lovely place called Martha's Vineyard for a few days. Working out of here, so
Nice,
loving life,
nice.
loving life.
That's fantastic. I'm getting my second jab this Saturday actually. So
Congratulations.
bracing for no impact. Only positive impact from being protected, but that's about it. And I don't know, for those who are watching, my plan is actually to be in Boston for July 12th. So I don't, as long as you're vaccinated, reach out, ping, we can connect there.
Yeah. Boston's living it. I love that they just removed the declaration of emergency right now in Europe, is that, or the US? And I saw that I just saw a note that said that like out of Ireland that they won't need PCR tests for traveling, this summer.
Oh, wow.
So it feels like we're kind of unraveling. It might be the end of our time soon, Eugene. It might be the
I know. Maybe if you're listening, just give us a shout, because I mean this was made for this evil world that hit upon us. And I'm trying to still stay away from saying the words, but even though we kind of gave up on it.
Yeah, cool.
But anyway, but it also means that teams are getting back together. We started talking about already pulling our team together at some point later this year.
Big Health
Health
Excel
event. Yeah, that's in Dublin, and I know we're talking about also a US event. So there's a bunch of stuff that's happening already or in plans. So let's cross the fingers. But talking about teams, I know I'm excited to speak to this person. Maybe you introduce her a little bit while I'm letting her in.
Awesome. Yeah. So we have a phenomenal pharmaceutical executive that had the pleasure of starting life off with me in early pharma land as she comes in here. And hey, there she is.
Hello.
I was
Hello, Eugene. Hello, Jim.
Hello, Keeshia.
Hello. I've been wondering when I was going to get the chance to make the honor roll of being a part of this platform.
There you go.
You. Here we go.
I was just telling Jim, I was looking forward to speaking to you and getting to know you.
Absolutely. Yeah, same here.
Heard amazing things.
She probably regrets. Yes. She probably regrets reconnecting with me over the years for kind of being thrown onto. So
no, it's been a great opportunity, and from us connecting early on in our careers and then reconnecting, almost 30 years later, it's been a great ride.
Wow.
And the things that you're doing in the space is awesome. So I'm excited and honored to be part of it.
Yeah, so I was just
Keeshia, how did you meet this? Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah. No, I was teeing you up. So I'll tee it up and I'll let you introduce yourself. Well, first of all, let me introduce you to Eugene. So Eugene, this is Keeshia Muhammad. So Keeshia, I thought was, beyond one of the nicest, coolest, best pharma executives I've ever had a chance to work with. And, we started off our careers together in Schering-Plough, which is now Merck. We had Jeff Berkowitz on the call. But I thought that Keisha's come to digital health. I mean, obviously, I don't know all the areas that you've worked in digital. You've worked with digital, but she's come to digital health. Not at the starting the company level, but actually by joining the board. So she joined the board of Health Beacon, and so that's how she's coming to digital health. So I thought that was kind of an interesting take. People are joining kind of digital health revolution in different ways, and she's chose to join at the top.
and I mean, first of all, that's the way to go.
Right.
But secondly, unraveling your journey to this, and I think this is the interesting part. Actually, we'll get to that, because as I don't want to say newcomer to digital health via Health Beacon, but I'd love your thoughts on kind of what does that even mean to you? But let's go back to 30 years when you met Jim, and he had even more hair, I guess, I'm assuming. I don't know.
Somehow or another, he's managed to keep that same amount of hair, which is awesome. He's just got a little bling on the side. And so joining Jim, we both were joined Shearing Plow, which is now Merck, as you mentioned, as finance managers, working with supporting the marketing function within that organization. And as Jim has complimented me, he has been, one of the most intelligent, brightest, and awesome and funniest guys I had the opportunity to work with as well back in the day. You may not know.
Who are you talking about?
I don't know that guy. I know. You don't.
I'm kidding.
No. Now he's a hard driving executive, and the whole management team is like, he's the Energizer Bunny, and everyone's like, where does he get? I know he's doing a shot of digital health, but he's doing a shot of something else because he's got so much energy and passion going on in it, and it's awesome. So, we started our careers in pharma and from the finance route. And, after a few years, we left that organization for a number of reasons. Jim went off to pursue, go to Ireland, and pursue that entrepreneurial route. I continued in the marketing frame. So I went from finance into marketing and really never looked back from that perspective, mainly in the respiratory area, working for a number of pharmaceutical companies from Teva to Mylan to Meta to Altan, and all of those transitions had a lot of acquisitions and turnover related to that. Yep. So background was is in marketing. I now do strategic marketing from a consulting perspective, mainly in pharmaceuticals and healthcare. But during that route and those opportunities, really looked at what digital health could mean to patients and to the organizations that I work for. There was definitely, at least in the respiratory space, the idea that there needed to be smart inhalers, for example, really putting more than just a counter on that, but really how could patients get that feedback about how they were being compliant with their medication. So that was really my first entree into looking at what digital health could mean, particularly from the patient perspective, and also the difficulties associated with that, in the pharmaceutical space and the collection of data, but also transitioning to what that meant for patients and how they were embracing that. Now that's maybe 10 or so years ago. Things have evolved and rapidly, as you know, in the technological and digital health space. Patients are much more familiar and comfortable with it. Pharmaceuticals may not be so much so, depending upon how they're looking at the technology. So a company like Health Beacon that's independent of those types of pharmaceutical, yep. It's not with a healthcare organization, but its own entity, really bringing that innovation to the space. And I think that's where digital health really has an opportunity, because it's not tied to a pharmaceutical and a product, which has its own agenda to some degree, but also can really be more, I would say, innovative and have a lot more latitude, because it's truly looking at what can be brought to the healthcare space and patient-centric as well, and looking at those issues that face patients in this, whatever the disease is, but helping them to be, much more compliant and take advantage and take control of their health.
Keeshia, I'm going to rewind back a little bit. I think, number of roles, especially in the marketing, right? Because, and, the experience that I've had, and again, this is probably stereotypical, but when you're talking about marketing budgets, right? And, large, small or large molecule sales, right? And a product, a physical product, in a lot of the discussions, some of these digital health technologies, it's in all of this real world evidence plans of a brand, but the actionability is very difficult, right? And we had Chris Haag from Propeller Health, et cetera. I'm sure you've run across them. I'm curious, like your experience, and you've mentioned a number of, companies without kind of getting into one or the other. What are your thoughts on, is this becoming real from a marketing perspective, even in marketing budgets?
So I would say that this, the pharmaceuticals, as great as they are, pharmaceutical organizations, they're still tied to some traditional approaches to the way they do business, and the constraints that are surrounding them, whether it be from the FDA, OIG, all of those things, put a number of constraints on the way they do business, particularly in the U.S. My background, while I've had worked on global teams, has really been more U.S. focused. So I think that from a marketing perspective and marketing budget, there are constraints as to how those marketing the marketing talent or the marketing executives can really have latitude to do what they need to do, because there are those checks and balances, whether it be with legal, compliance, etc. So there are challenges related to their ability to really embrace some of the innovation that goes on based on the way the organizations are structured, and how how much appetite or risk the organization has to venture out into these areas. Also, the investment that they've made on their own level in terms of innovation and technology. So while they've done, while there's an organization like Health Beacon and they can partner with, there's also the strides they've made years ago in technology, patented things that they're reluctant to let go of. To some degree, those that can be obsolete at this point, and that's where the challenge comes in, where they're a little bit behind the times as it relates to innovation, because they latched onto these things 10, 15 years ago and are stuck trying to bring that to fruition, as opposed to just cutting bait and really looking at a different approach and keeping up with the times. So pharma is a challenge, particularly in the U.S. I would say that the healthcare space, some of the healthcare providers and the insurers may have an opportunity to be more, I would say, more interested and more palatable to address it. So that's where we have to look at it from an innovation perspective, and really look at who we go after as stakeholders. Pharma is a great opportunity. However, the challenge and the hurdles associated with pharma are somewhat difficult. And by the time you get through that process, the train has left the station.
Right. I was wondering, like, just staying with that for a second. And did you start in before you got into pharma? Were you GE or were you?
So yeah, my background is I'm a finance major. Went to school in Virginia. Started with GE and their financial leadership program. So my background is finance, and it was a nice partnering between finance and marketing. Everyone thought, you need to go the sales route to get into marketing. I've never sold. I'm not a salesperson at all. I was fortunate enough for the folks at Shearing to recognize my passion for the business and my understanding of the business from a finance perspective, to let me go into a marketing role while leapfrogging that sales perspective. So,
personality, an outsized personality for finance. Right?
Well, I was going to say, real marketing is actually driven by metrics, right?
Exactly.
There's obviously the creative side, right?
Sure.
Very much of KPI and experience driven and numbers driven.
Right.
So.
Right. And that's what I think at the end of the day, I've always said to my salespeople, marketing sets the strategy and sales executes, right? So, I have to understand the business top to bottom, understand numbers in order for me to even develop a marketing strategy that they can then go out and execute. If I listen to every salesperson that was on the team, and no knock against salespeople, because again, they are on the front lines, and I have a great respect for that talent and that line of business. It's simply that you have to understand what you're going after and why you're going after it. And that's where marketing and the finance piece comes together, really, really well. And I think that's also what people need to understand when you're approaching a marketing team. They're being challenged to understand their business in a different way. It's not just about the end sale. It's all the things that ladder up into how that product is going to be sold and what are the economics associated with it. So any good marketing talent has that understanding of the business top to bottom, and it's going to be challenged along those parameters. So that's the other difficulty, because they are very business oriented and have to know all the parts of the business in order to execute on getting that product sold and into physicians and out to the end consumer and patient.
I'm going to just keep writing, because to me, this is also a fascinating discussion when it comes to digital health and partnerships with younger companies and startups, right? And while I never ran a brand, right, in many of the discussions, and I'm picking completely random numbers, but if I have 100K to invest in a campaign that has worked before, and it may or may not be marginally less of results, but still it's predictable, versus putting in 50 to 100K into a partnership with a startup, right? So putting your sort of financial acumen to that's a tough decision to make if you have a KPI on your back, right, to increase the RX sales. So I'm curious on your thoughts on that, like.
So you're absolutely right, Eugene, and that's the dilemma that a marketing exec or a product manager has when they're trying to determine in which way they're going to go. Especially when at least in pharma, there's always that quarterly result, the results to the investors, how the product is doing, and also what that means for their career progression at the end of the day. So I think the idea is the business case that has to be put forth. They have to understand the numbers, and if they don't understand that, then they need to bring in their internal resources to help identify that. But something that Health Beacon does really well, and I think this is a testament to the way Jim understands the business and his background, is having that business case really almost. Yep. It's a layup in terms of how what Health Beacon can bring to that organization, and all the other things that he's doing around that to make it not just a slam dunk from a innovation and product growth perspective, but also so that the organization does not have issues and challenges around the legalities of it, et cetera. So, really looking at it from a very 360 holistic, but also from the client's perspective, and making sure that all those boxes are checked so that at the end of the day, the decision is fairly easy to make and can be, whether it be legal that we're talking to, or finance, or marketing, or sales. It's there. I think the challenge becomes simply the appetite for a level of risk, because again, it's either their internal structures and parameters that they have related to their own innovation, or they just simply don't get it in this environment, because they're just not having a more forward-looking view, because they're so bogged down in their current state. And that's the other challenge. Pharma and some of these traditional organizations are really caught up in just the immediate quarter to 6 months, the forward-looking view. And I'm not saying this as a knock to any of the folks in the industry. It's simply the ability to have that lead time and look 18 months out, and that vision of what's the landscape going to look like is somewhat difficult, which is why I think a lot of organizations are starting to put in place innovation teams, right? So people that can have that longer purview and start to look at what's the market going to look like 18, 24, 36 months down the road, and be able to make those decisions and take that off of their immediate product management teams. And that's where we now have to insert ourselves in trying to find those individuals in the organization and get with those teams in order to move the needle forward.
What do you think, Eugene? What do you think the average tenure is of a digital innovation executive inside pharma? Because Eugene was one.
About 3.5 years, and I think that was pretty long. Right. But it's actually, it's an interesting discussion, because as I was listening to you, Keeshia, right, like you were saying, quarter to quarter, which I don't disagree. I'm in many publicly traded, especially companies, right? Mm-hmm. And it's on one side, it's a little ironic, because it takes about a decade and $2 billion, right, to get something. And I think that's where the pressures are, right? Because $2 billion invested, right? And that's just into that one particular molecule. Right. Mm-hmm. There's many others that failed. So overall, and now it's the pressure to commercialize it as quickly as possible and get as many RXs. So it's the dichotomy of a long-term view into the product design, let's call it that, right? Mm-hmm. And a short-term view into the commercialization.
Right.
Absolutely. So here's what you have. You have years ago, when this molecule was being developed, and a business case that supported it. The market dynamics, and I can particularly in respiratory, which is the market landscape changed drastically over the years in terms of when you had your steroid molecules, your monotherapy molecules, then you had your dual therapy with Advair and all of its competitors, then triple therapy. No one really saw that landscape evolving either as rapidly or as differently as when they first started these, introducing these molecules. On top of that, then there's the innovation. And so you're stuck with a business case that said, let's develop this product, and it's going to be a blockbuster billion dollar drug, or even $500 million, right? And then all of a sudden the market changes, right? The FDA puts, black box warnings on things, so everything that you had in development changes. And over time, the opportunity for that product diminishes. And then the innovation comes in. So now you've got a landscape that's not only saying, introduce the product, but it better be, it may need to have some innovation to it. And the train is, they really are behind the 8 ball. So, the innovation teams that are coming on board are still stuck with old products that they've got to put bells and whistles on. Right. And it's it's really, to your point, Eugene, it's a dichotomy as well as it's a dilemma. And it's also, how do you, the tenure of anyone in these organizations to be able to see that, that 10-year or 15-year view of a market is limited because there's so many, they rotate,
Also, as you were saying, as you were talking about that, like in your way, these products are invented, like Eugene, you're saying invented, they have a 10, 15-year view, they put in $500 million, $1 billion into the product, and they actually, organizationally have this very long-term, they have to have a long-term perspective, right? They have to have a long-term perspective. But it's one of those things, it's like, it's a bit like by the time the product, so if the long-term perspective for them is say it's 12 years of patent life or whatever, a viable patent life. So by the time the commercial teams get it, they've got 4 years or 5 years. So like, they're like, so like we can think long-term, but you have to think about the next like 3 years, right? So now when that business case that Eugene's talking about, it's like, hey, we don't have, we don't have, I find that's really, I actually hadn't quite thought about it that way. A lot of our challenges will come up is like, it's like, the product gets launched, so it's all about initiation of therapy, market share. And
it's new to therapy. It's new to therapy, right?
Yeah, it's new to therapy. So it doesn't really matter where you just gotta get the doctors prescribing, right? And then, and then from there, it's kind of like, then maybe you're fending off some competition, and then you're kind of, harvesting, the last few years, and maybe then you look at adherence. So like adherence kind of almost comes in the final, 24 months, like, oh shit, we're going to lose the patent, we need adherence, if in a funny way,
and it's super interesting to me, right? Because like, again, if we keep looking at pharma, right, core of it is the molecule that's been developed over a decade. If we look at services, right, that's, it's tough for pharma to get into that. So standalone kind of health services, that's, in many cases, it's almost a conflict of interest because those services may be prescribing drugs, right? That's obviously not. And then, let's just make up a sample where Health Beacon would have been included in your phase 1 or phase 2 trials of a particular drug, right?
Right.
Well, guess what? Your technology would change in the next 8 years by the time you're into phase 4, right?
Right.
And so this is where a lot of these innovation teams are struggling. Okay, do I pair up with my internal stakeholders? Well, there's challenges through going through the phases. Do I go at the commercial? Then there's challenges about monetization of that partnership, right? Outside of predictable campaigns. I don't know. I don't want to go back to pharma. That's for sure.
That's the challenge, right? That's the challenge because you are put in a box to some degree, and you're not as innovative as you want to be or think you can be. There's just the structure sometimes is not there. And even the idea of partnering with an organization, to your point, Eugene, it's like, okay, well, is this the right partner? Can they go is it through the long haul, or is it just something for the moment that I'm getting involved in? And that's the challenge as well. So it's a difficult one, but I think companies have to do partnerships as opposed to trying to develop this internally. What innovation in pharma was basically putting a wraparound service and all these patient compliance programs. And Teva did it really well with its shared solutions in terms of with Copaxone. I mean, it really, and it was one of the things that kept its patent, or at least kept it in the marketplace, even at a branded level, because of the shared service that they had, the wraparound support to that, and that was innovative at the time. And now everyone's doing some type of wraparound patient service and allowing patients to get information, etc., and nurses and things of that nature, making sure they're compliant. However, Health Beacon is like the next level of that, putting it right into the patient's hands, and where you're taking out all of the extra costs associated with nurses and and information and teleservices and reminders about compliance. It's now digital. What was once very manual is now digital.
I think I know we could all chat about this back and forth, but I think one of the things really interesting though is it's almost recognition of this implementation time frame. So like, so it's I feel like, that, just to your point, Keeshia, like, it's like, legal and compliance and concerns and data validation and like, can I trust the counterparty? Sorry guys, still got you. Can I trust the kind of counterparty risk of, the other partner? Are they a good partner? So you have all this like implementation, which it kind of almost in some ways, if you think about it, it shouldn't be 30 days, right? Like something meaningful, like it takes a bit of time to kind of get your head around that and contract that and do that, so this is kind of a little bit of a dilemma of like, how do you land that? Like, that sounds to me like in reality, that's like, it's like a 1.5-year process or something, right? You might start in 90 days, but you're going to kind of, and then to really scale it, you're probably like 1.5 years or 2 years later. So
again, I'm getting attacked again last time too.
And that timeline, Jim, that you mentioned factors into their ability to actually, I mean, so there's a further delay besides them getting the concept. You've sold it in, they understand it, whatever the innovative technology and digital technology is, then for it to actually get up and to go to scale, the implementation time frame based on all of those different parameters, like you said, may be anywhere from 9 to 18 months. And in that time frame, the way the marketplace is, at least digitally, you're behind the 8 ball. I mean, it's happening so rapidly that pharma's got to really get, and we're picking on pharma, but any organization, particularly in the healthcare space, needs to understand that they've really got to challenge themselves to be much more reactive and proactive to some degree.
Speed is going to be really interesting. Like, speed now for the pharma companies is going to be a competitive differentiation, right? If they can take, a 2-year implementation cycle and shrink that to 9 months, then they might have an advantage.
I always say that it's really about a speed of learning of an organization. How adaptive is an organization to continue learning quicker cycles, right? And I mean, at the end of the day, the vaccines, right? I mean, if you think about it, I know mRNA goes way back, right? And there's been many trials and efforts and tribulations around it. It pulled together. That, to me, the question is, can we see what we just saw with mRNA? The other pandemic cancer, right? 400 plus cancers out there, and I know that mRNA is being tested, right, for that. So
that changes everything, right? Does that change everything? Because now your whole you have this like platform technology. You're using software to recode it really quickly. The regulators seem to kind of be responding to that, and they had no choice. So it really, that might, like, this whole idea of the cycles might go quicker, right? Maybe.
And this is, I think, the opportunity then to pair this up with the digital health technologies, whatever that means to you as an individual, right? But I think if we can start matching those cycles, which is, I think, still challenging. I mean, obviously the world came together to solve this. But I think that's the only way that we're going to start seeing, as I think I talked about a couple of years back, biotech and digitech really coming together, right?
Yeah. So I want to change gears here for a second. Let's change gears. So as a, and I want to get like your take. So Keeshia, like, and I don't, I'm not going to make this always. I would never make it a health beacon commercial. You know me. I never promote myself.
Right. What do you mean? Isn't that what you texted?
I have no problem doing that.
But, so in terms of like company building, Eugene, you have a ton of experience in that, and thinking about creating the company. So, one of, like my perspective or thinking about, trying to think about up and down the organization and thinking about the board level. And I had this concept of like diversity of thinking, right? Like diversity of thinking, which might come in all different shapes and sizes and formats or whatever it is, but actually having built hair levels. But so diversity of thinking. So, I think like, when I was thinking about like with Keeshia joining our board, I have to say, so we started a company in Ireland. We had our initial, we have an international financier base, but, very Irish influence, right? And so one of the things I had was to make sure that I had, diversity at the board level, and not just diversity of like all the things people think about in a modern day, but actually diversity of thinking, right? Yep. You're not thinking Ireland out. Maybe someone's coming in from international experience, maybe some different personal experience. But maybe just get your take on that, and then a little bit like
unravel it
a little bit, Keeshia.
So for me, it was great to have a conversation, reconnecting with Jim and just understanding what he was doing. Keeping up, on LinkedIn and seeing the different posts in terms of how he's, sort of the serial entrepreneur, and now what's happened with Health Beacon, and looking at
a podcaster and a YouTuber as well.
I know, right? I mean, who would have thought? But actually, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I mean, he's got the personality and skills, and partnering with you two. I mean, I see you guys. It's great information, but comical, and I love seeing the series. So it's great. You got it's really good stuff. And I'm not just saying that to boast the wheel. It is good stuff. Like I said, I wanted to be on there. I'm like, how do I get on this? I'm like, Jim, it's been how many my top liver. But no, I think the idea of the diversity of thinking, for sure, getting outside of the Irish marketplace, and not just, it's just a matter of, as the company's growing. And this is where I think, as you look at how you want to move forward in any organization, what skill sets do you have to bring at the board level, which is really going to breed that advisory, both the checks and balances, where you need some of the folks that are going to continue to keep you to your original strategy, or at least help you understand how you're moving afield from that. But also a certain group of folks that are going to be able to say visionary and look at different markets and have different skill sets that challenge that board makeup. And that's the other thing, that to have a healthy challenge, and people that can do that in a respectful way that helps, move the business forward, having an understanding of market trends, and understanding when we may need to move or shift the strategy in a different perspective, and bring both the skill set of that understanding as well as the diversity of thought, and saying, have we thought about it this way? Let's not stay with the traditional approach, which may no longer be working because of those trends in the market, right? And so how can we react much more quickly and innovatively in the space to help the company grow and reach the objectives that we've set out, which is, overarchingly, it's growth at a steady, and strong pace that keeps the company viable, as opposed to being connected to maybe an older strategy that's not saying it doesn't work, but needs to evolve over time. And I think that's where the diversity of the board comes in, that helps make the innovation and the movement and the momentum sustained and maintained, as opposed to keeping it in some, sort of a traditional structure when you look at a board perspective. So not only the diversity of thought and skill sets, but also the diversity when it comes to gender, ethnicity, and race, because at the end of the day, those differences also come to play in a way that you can't identify on a piece of paper that says, they've got this title and this resume. It's going to be those other experiences that they've had as a result of their differences, or our differences, that will bring to the table, just in the way you communicate, the way you get ideas shared, the way you move the needle forward, and how you position things in the organization and at the board level in order to help the company move forward. So a lot of that diversity in different buckets. And we've always looked at it, I think, traditionally, in terms of, let's have a diverse skill set. Let's have just, people with a great resume, and some titles that can, that'll be impressive to external stakeholders. But at the end of the day, there's also that element of diversity that's come in. And I think that's getting more cachet and getting a lot more traction, especially in this era of diversity and inclusion. And you hear the D&I stuff in the U.S. a lot. And in Pittsburgh, it's a big. But I think Jim's been a smart cookie for broadening the board base in that way.
To me, and then this is you brought D&I and getting a lot of recognition in the U.S. and a lot of talk. Like, to me, what we're talking about now is just common sense of if you think about it, like culture eats strategy for life, and culture is built on not just people that are saying yes, but multitude of views into what happens, right? Like Maureen and I would joke around that the meeting that we're discussing some decision and it's just like smooth as butter, that means we made a wrong decision because we wanted to, like, it's impossible that everybody just agrees, right? And so when you bring different backgrounds, cultures, education, like, that's the only way you actually push forward. So I'm still struggling that this is now kind of bubbling up, right? But it's like,
right.
So sorry, Jim. I'm sorry, Jim. You're really not that innovative. It's just plain common sense.
No, like I've been, in thinking through, it's funny when, Keeshia, you and I talked, and I said, hey, maybe there's a chance, what do you think about? And we kind of started talking about it, and so I went to my board, which, you've now met them multiple times, unfortunately not in person because of the environment we're in, but they're very disciplined, very successful executives, have backed me, which I'm, thankful for. In most cases, they put, very substantial resources and time, they're putting their reputation on the line. So with all that kind of thankfulness there, but coming from maybe a consistent perspective, financiers, and when I mooted the idea of appointing you, saying, here's what I'm thinking, I got 100% acceptance of it, so it wasn't even like, and I kind of wonder a little bit, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, like anytime you point anyone to the board, and anyone you point to the board, people are always going to question that. It's like, what are they bringing to the table? Rightfully. But I have to say, as I explained kind of the background and coming in, it was just doors were wide open. So I almost wonder whether digital health entrepreneurs know that the door is open. Probably there's probably no one resisting it. I kind of wonder, because in my head I was kind of like, oh, here comes a new board member. They're gonna, I'm going to go through a tough time just making the case for it. And it was 100% open.
Right.
That's awesome.
Well, that's great to know. I mean, that's, we hadn't even had that discussion in terms of how it went. And since you hadn't, I was like, well, maybe there was a challenge. I didn't want to tell me. But no, I think that to your point, Jim, there is a level of, at least at that, when you're looking at digital health and that a level of innovation, there has to be that broadness of thought, more so than I think when you're talking about traditional companies and traditional board makeup. And having the people that you've selected to be at that level, I mean, they are all fantastic. I mean, I love the challenge. I love the thinking. And even when it's, it's sometimes it's like, some more, US focused or EU focused at times, but being able to have that conversation with them, it's very respectful. I think they are all, we're all, on board with what Health Beacon can do and what it already is doing in the marketplace, and just really, struggling to have everyone else outside understand exactly what it can be. So I think that's the only challenge. The board is extremely, excited and supportive, and it's just a matter of having the different perspectives. And hearing the different thinking, so I get challenged when, one of the board members brings up a topic and I'm like, oh, hadn't thought of it that way. And I think it's vice versa as well. And the fact that we can come together, have those, constructive conversations, and yet still all be, every board meeting pretty much ends with, let's keep going forward. Let's keep moving in the direction. Yes, we've shifted gears a little bit, but right. I know you you're sweating bullets, every call. But no, what's exciting about this is that there still is a passion for what Health Beacon brings to the marketplace, and it's exciting to see their excitement. And we've got age range difference, we've got certainly diversity of skill set, gender, etc., country-wise, and it's just amazing that with all that diversity, there's still the single-mindedness of Health Beacon is moving in the right direction.
There we go, Eugene.
That was so powerful. Can you repeat that again?
You're recording.
I guess we'll be able to rewind it at some point. Yeah.
Right. And I'm a fast talker too, so you'll have to slow me down when I get off fast.
That's all. So when I listen to podcasts, I listen to it at 1.3 or 1.4 speed or whatever that's available. So I think I'm gonna have to listen to it at normal speed. But so I'm looking at our timing. I don't know, Jim, you want to go to any other? I mean, I can keep unpacking, but we can also go to your favorite question too.
Yeah, no, I'm dying to hear. I don't know if you've cheated and listened to some other podcasts, but here's the big question. So picture yourself a digital health entrepreneur, outside of Detroit, outside, and you've come up with a phenomenal idea, and you're starting it up, and you go to yourself for advice. What advice would you give the digital health entrepreneur starting a company today out of Detroit?
Wow. It's going to be
Detroit.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Right, I'm sure because Detroit's like, I'm not.
We can go to Pennsylvania.
We're going to go to Pittsburgh. We're going to go to Pittsburgh, right? Because Pittsburgh has got Google, it's got Target,
let's go to Pittsburgh. So you're a digital health entrepreneur out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh.
Well, it's a matter of getting having the right people to have a conversation with. So it's the networking and the connections first and foremost to bounce those ideas off of. I mean, I think one of the things that I think you have a great network, Jim, of people that you can tap into. Pick up the phone and say, what do you think about this? And really peel back that and reduce that time in terms of whether it's going to work or not. But at the end of the day, it's having that passion as well, where your market, the industry, and sticking with it, right? Knowing that this is something that is going to be of value to patients, to the industry, and not getting discouraged. Number one, having a network of individuals that you can bounce innovative ideas off of. So getting those people that are in the space and have been in it in a way that understands some of the trends and nuances and the challenges associated with that. And then and lastly, not giving up. I think that there is definitely a level of stick-to-itiveness that's required, because this in digital, it's changing very rapidly. And so it's a matter of being able to roll with the trends and having that energy to stick with it and understand that what you're doing really has value, because there are going to be a lot of naysayers that are going to tell you, this isn't going to work. We don't need that. But, having that vision and being able to see it through is going to be I would say that's the advice.
Persistence. Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And to the millions of viewers and listeners, hit that subscribe and follow button. Till next time.
Thank you for having me, guys. I'm glad that I got a shot at digital health. Thank you.